Hey, good morning, everyone. Grace and peace. Welcome to Find the Intersection. My name is Paul Dezay. And today we are talking about Luke chapter 9, verses 28 to 43. Luke chapter 9, 28 to 43. Today, this week, is the last week before Lent. And so the last week before Lent, the last Sunday before Lent, which will be this coming Sunday, is Transfiguration Sunday. And so that always marks our calendar for that Sunday before Lent begins, the Sunday before Ash Wednesday. And so we're drawing the close of the season of Epiphany. Season of Epiphany is all about the manifestation of Jesus and who he is. And this particular passage drives that point home. And we'll take a look at that. Sorry, I'm running behind today. I'm really not running at all. I'm very just tired. So as my Mondays are my Sabbath, I just kind of move slow. And so that's what I'm doing today. All right, so let's jump into the passage, the Transfiguration passage. That's the context. Something I didn't notice before is that it's Peter, John, and James are going up the mountain with Jesus, and they're going to pray. And so prayer is a catalyst for these events that transpire after this. Another thing I didn't notice before is that while Moses, Elijah, and Jesus were in their glorified way, Peter and the others had fallen asleep, which I found that interesting. So if you're out there like me, kind of sleepy today, well, kind of in good company. There's a lot of sleeping that's taking place in the passage. Anyway, so let's jump in. So the first thing that I noticed was this idea of Jesus is connected to the past. He's connected to the story of Moses and Elijah. The Old Testament is significant. Jesus is a bridge between the old and the new, the old, the past, and the future. And so we have stories this week about Moses in our Old Testament passage. So when you're reading that on Wednesday, you'll see Moses interacting with God and the display of glory. And so we have that connection here. It's interesting that Moses went up the mountain to experience the glory of God. And here Jesus is on the mountain in his glorified state. There's a connection there that I think is beautiful. The second thing that stood out to me is the word glory, and glory being the resurrected state of Jesus, the heavenly state of Moses and Elijah, the shining of the glory, the weight of God's presence. And so there's a connection there that Jesus isn't just a teacher. Jesus isn't just a prophet. There's a weight to what he is doing. And the resurrection state of Jesus, this shining state, is a preview of our resurrected state in the future. And then the third thing, and probably the most significant for me today in this passage, was the voice of the Lord saying, "This is my son, my chosen one, listen to him," which reminds us back to the first Sunday of Epiphany, which is the baptism of Jesus Sunday, where the voice of God spoke and said, "This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased." There's a kind of a connection between the two, and everything is about the identity of God. So even though Jesus is up there with Moses and Elijah, and Peter opens his mouth, and I love that point because I relate to Peter so many times in my journey for making mistakes and opening my mouth and saying things I shouldn't say. Peter wants to build a tent for Jesus, Moses, and Elijah, saying that they're kind of equal. God opens up and says, as the voice of the Lord says, no. Jesus is my son. He is, it doesn't say he's superior, but it's this point that maybe this whole story of the Transfiguration is to say that Jesus is this the fulfillment of the story of Moses, which I believe it is. And so Jesus' identity is the Son of God. He is elevated higher than Moses and Elijah. and he is leading a new exodus. I found it interesting also that in verse number 31, it says, and they were glorious to see, and they were speaking about his exodus from this world. I just found it interesting that the word exodus was used. Jesus is leading through his death a new exodus from sin, where Moses led an exodus from slavery, from Egypt. Jesus is leading a new exodus from the freedom from sin. Anyway, there is so much in here. I am still not awake, so I have no idea if anything I said made sense. But I would love to hear what you saw in this passage. Again, there is so much beautiful stuff in this passage. What stood out to you? What did you notice? Share in the comments, and we can learn from each other. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be looking at 2 Corinthians 3:12 all the way to chapter 4, verse 2. Yeah, have a great day, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.